How successful were you?
Like, incredibly unsuccessful. I thought I could do it while Evan was like at a haircut or something so that he wouldn't kind of be involved in it. And when he came back, I was just sitting in a pile of mud and like eggshells. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, it needs to go in the trash. I'll help you. And he did, because he's a wonderful husband.
Well, it could have also just gone out into like, I don't know. I mean, it's not landfill. It's active compost, right?
So at the time, Cambridge didn't have composting, which was part of the reason we did the worm bin. They do now. Also, part of the problem with the worm bin is it didn't really compost that much. Like, I mean, you didn't get that much compost out of it.
I would say that it was more like that particular time was not a time when we needed to harvest the compost.
Are you a more active gardener now than you were then?
Yeah, I didn't have the community plot then. So that's like one reason this has come back up.
And let me ask you this question. Are you a more active gardener now because you have more access to gardening space and your interest has grown? Or are you just gardening more now in order to justify getting that worm bin back?
I mean, it's the former, but I can't deny that the latter is appealing.
You love that worm bin and you want to have it going in your kitchen so much.
Yeah, we don't have any, like, we're not allowed to have cats or dogs in our apartment. So I think this is a way to have like 500 to 1,000 very low level pets.
I love the way you're thinking, Anne.
Thanks.
And I appreciate your honesty.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, look, that was a traumatic experience. And I can appreciate why, Evan, you would have some trepidation about going back to the worm bin and trying again. Tell me about your trepidation.
The grubs are a big part of that trepidation.
The grubs aren't going to happen again.
Well, you never know. Part of my whole trepidation with this is the uncertainty with which this could happen again.
And do you know what you did wrong last time?
Oh, yeah. I put it outside.
See, the answer is simple, Evan. Your box of worms will never leave your home.
Mm-hmm. So I guess there's other sources of trepidation. Worm bins are large, and we live in a pretty small apartment. So there's really not a whole lot of room for these 500 to 1,000 little wrigglers to live.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it also is just that there now is a very convenient and accessible way to compost, which is through the citywide composting program, which, as the bailiff noted, comes with a convenient green plastic tote that is aerated. You can just take that little bit of compost in a green compostable bag down to a larger compost receptacle, and the city picks it up. And the way that they do it is it's anaerobic digestion, so it's highly efficient. And it also produces fertilizer that people can use across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
And where do the Commonwealthians get that fertilizer from? If they want to use that mutually collected compost from all over Cambridge, where do they go to get it?
So I believe what happens is Cambridge sends the compost up to the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, and they process it at their plant, and then they have some sort of supply chain where they sell the compost.
Sorry, you guys got like maximum pedants on your show this week.
No, it's great. I understand better now that, Evan is a straight up socialist. He wants the government to have its hands in all of the composting that happens in the Commonwealth. It's all collected directly from you, and it's a centralized decomposition economy. And then it sells it back to everybody. But whereas Anne is like a frontiers person who wants to be making her own compost in her own kitchen with her own worms that she has all named, her own pet worms. She's come up with 500 to 1,000 little names for them. She's got her own worm herd of her own, and they all bear the little brand of Anne. And then the compost that comes out of that bin goes directly into her community plot. And she wants to benefit from her own labor. Doesn't want to give this all up to the government, right, Anne?
Yeah.
Real John Galt sort of attitude.
I never read anything by Ayn Rand.
Yeah, it's good to plead the fifth to any Ayn Rand references, for sure. The project that Anne wants to undertake is not, let me get some compost for the community garden. The project is, I want to have 1,000 worms in a box that are my friends and listen to them munch all night long. Can you hear them? Can you hear them doing their work in there?
I would say if you listen closely and use your imagination, you could hear some quiet rustling sounds.
Evan, when you had the worm bin before, did you ever wake up in the middle of the night and discover Anne listening to the worm bin with a stethoscope?
No, but I'm a pretty sound sleeper, so it could have happened.
She likes this idea of having a box of worms in your kitchen. Aside from the obvious alternative, which is city-provided composting service, how do you just on a gut level feel about box of worms, Evan?
If we had more space, if it wasn't going to be directly in our kitchen really, we have like 4 rooms in our apartment. We have a kitchen, we have a dining room, we have a living room, and we have a bedroom.
And a bathroom.
Where do you live?
In Cambridge.
In Cambridge.
Oh, nice.
So if we're going to have a worm bin, it's got to be in one of those 4 rooms. I don't think, for obvious reasons, the bedroom or the living room or the dining room are good locations. And I would also I would posit that the kitchen is not a good place for worms. And can I also just note that the worm bin will smell probably a bit more than the city-provided compost bin because you're not taking it out frequently.
I had read that it was odorless.
Yeah, if I can direct you to the evidence I submitted testimony from a roommate who lived with a prior worm bin.
Right. So this is a series of text exchanges submitted by Anne between herself and her former roommate, Catherine. Catherine lived with me in my first apartment out of college where I had my first worm bin. That must have been fun for Catherine to discover once she moved in with you.
Yeah, well, she signed the lease.
Right. She couldn't get out of it. Here's the back and forth. Anne, what did you think when I got the worm bin? Catherine, I thought it was a little weird. My family didn't grow up composting, so I was new to the idea, and I definitely hadn't heard of indoor worm composting before. But I also knew that you very likely did extensive research about worm composting before suggesting it seriously, making me think it probably wasn't as weird as it initially sounded. Anne, were there any issues with smells or infestations? Catherine, no issues whatsoever. Anne, did you find it overall innocuous or even fun? Catherine, I honestly forgot it was even there. You likely found it more fun than me, but it did offer a good topic for parties. And I just remembered that I taught how to start your own worm composting bin as my audition to be an SAT tutor in 2010 during the economic downturn. So it was at least useful. Anne, thank you. Catherine, have I said enough yet? Will you please call your worms off? This is terrifying. Please get the worms off me, Anne. I made up that last part.
Judge Hodgman, I move to dismiss this evidence on the grounds that there's no credibility in anyone who claims that a worm bin makes for a good topic at parties.
I think it's a great topic. I think the story of Anne getting down and dirty in the garbage in the middle of the living room, trying to get those grubs out before Evan can get back from his haircut and then getting caught, and how their marriage survived that. That's a terrific story.
Everybody's sitting around the dinner table and enjoying a beautiful meal. And someone says, okay, classic conversation starter. Where do you keep your red wrigglers?
You also sent in a picture of the worm bin, Anne, that you plan to buy. No more DIY for you. You've got a kit in mind, right? Describe this kit.
So this is like a more professional grade worm bin. And by professional, it's still for the home composter, but it really kind of streamlines the sifting of the compost that you would have to do with a DIY bin, because the worms will travel upward or downward between the layers depending where the food source is. So it's easier to remove basically one of the 4 trays of finished compost and, kind of do what you need to with it.
So I'm seeing a picture here. It looks like a stacked series of green bins, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
And you're suggesting that as the worms work their way through each layer, you can just sort of remove a layer, dish out the liquid gold to your plants, reset, and then it kind of cycles through. Is that right?
That's right.
I don't see any amateur grub holes in here.
Yeah. I mean, not as far as I know.
Would you be able to guarantee to Evan that this is grub proof?
I mean, there are no guarantees in life, but I believe that if I keep it indoors, that we won't have any further